The Toyota GR86 is one of the last true budget rear-wheel drive sports cars Americans can buy new. It's an attainable ripper, the kind of car that reminds you of your rowdier years and makes you question why any of us grow up in the first place. After all, the GR86 never did, and that's the beauty of it.
This is the 2024 Toyota GR86 Trueno Edition, which is a cute little guy with 228 horsepower, rear-wheel drive, and a 6-speed manual transmission. And I am Atlantis King. Let's go for a drive and stick around for the end of this video to get this GR86's full report card.
The Toyota GR86 is a car for enthusiasts. It belongs to a duo that we call the Toyobaru twins, because the Toyota GR86 and the Subaru BRZ are technically the same car, powered by the same Subaru Boxer 4 engine. They were a joint project by the two automakers that debuted in 2011, making them so old that the 86 was branded as the Scion FR-S when it came onto the market. Don't tell anybody, but I keep trying to call it the FR-S in this review. Scion, Toyota's attempt to appeal to the kids, has been dead since 2016, and Toyota proper took over sales and branding of its Toyobaru model.
The naming system for the Toyota GR86 is actually really interesting. The original car, which was called the Scion FR-S, seems like a bunch of random letters, and it kinda is, but they mean something. Scion president Jack Hollis said that it could have stood for friggin' really sweet, but in fact, it stood for a much more normal thing, which is front engine, rear wheel drive, sport. When Scion died and Toyota took the car over, it got the 86 name, which refers back to the famous 1980s AE86 Corolla GT-S. Over time, GR got added. GR stands for Gazoo Racing, and it's very popular on Toyota's performance cars now. This specific GR86 is called the Trueno Edition, which is also an AE86 reference. Trueno means thunder in Spanish, and the Corolla GT-S hot hatch was called the Sprinter Trueno in Japan. The GR86 is a modern, budget, adolescent sports car, so it kind of makes sense that it would refer back to that.
With a quick glance, the Toyota GR86 and Subaru BRZ look almost exactly the same. But these are two automakers trying to sell two cars, and they wanted them to have some differences. The differences you'll see the most are on the front end. The Subaru BRZ has more lines and angles and vents, whereas the GR86 is more simple and smooth. The BRZ also has more of an upturned smile on the grille, while the GR86 is more downturned and serious. The differences you'll feel are a result of tweaks to the engine tuning, chassis, suspension, and more. They can be boiled down to what every racetrack test says about these two cars. The BRZ tolerates you more when you mess up, whereas the GR86 will bite you.
When you open the hood of the GR86, you see three things. The first thing, it says Toyota. Then it says Boxer. Then it says Subaru, because this is a Subaru Boxer engine. Most of the time when you have sports cars and four-cylinder engines, you have what's called an inline four. That means all the cylinders are in a line and they point mostly vertically. With a Boxer 4, you have two cylinders on each side and they punch outward like a boxer. Yeah, isn't that cute? With this Boxer 4, we have a 2.4-liter engine. It's naturally aspirated and it makes 228 horsepower and 184 pound-feet of torque. All of that goes through a 6-speed manual to the rear wheels. All of this might seem counterintuitive because if you know Toyota, you know that their longtime reputation is for reliability. Whereas with Subaru's Boxer engines, the reputation is a little more shaky. We'll start with the best part about it. Subaru always brags that these Boxer engines have a much lower center of gravity. And honestly, when you open the hood, this engine does sit down here. That has performance benefits. The big complaint about a Subaru Boxer engine is reliability, and also accessibility. When you do things like spark plugs, which would be simple in another car, you have to really dig in here with a Voxer engine because the cylinders are pointing outward. A very common complaint about this engine specifically in these cars is that there is too much RTV around the oil pan. That flakes off, gets in the oil sump pickup tube, clogs it, and then it starves your engine of oil. And what happens when your engine doesn't have oil? It's gone. There have been tons of forum threads and news headlines and everything else about this, so the automakers are definitely aware of it.
This is the second generation of the Toyota GR86. The first generation was around for about 10 years, and its styling actually looked pretty modern throughout all of them. The second generation came around and improved a bunch of things, like upping the power and smoothing out the headlights. But mostly, it led to a resurgence in buyer interest. Sales of the GR86 fell off at the end of the first generation, with Toyota USA selling 3,400 GR86 models in 2019, 2,500 in 2020, and 1,100 in 2021. When the new car came out in 2022, annual US sales jumped to 12,000. That's not a ton compared to Toyota's other cars, but it is a ton more than the outgoing car.
One of the big styling updates for this GR86 over the last model is the headlights. I really like these headlights, and I also really like the last ones, and I love that they are adaptive. Our YouTube partner Magna also makes adaptive headlights called Envision Adaptive Driving Beam Headlights. Adaptive driving beam projectors change the forward lighting beam pattern to help create a safer environment for both the driver and oncoming traffic. When you drive down twisty roads, the headlights respond to follow what's in front of you. Magna takes it a step further and uses sensors to identify other cars and road signs, and then angle the beams to avoid blinding other drivers or causing glare. They also have a whole lineup of advanced driving assistance systems that seamlessly integrate into a number of cars on the road today. With their advancements in illumination and vision, Magna is helping people see the road more clearly and navigate more safely than ever before. Big thank you to Magna for partnering with this channel. They are awesome, and I cannot wait to teach you about more Magna technologies in the future. This GR86 is a 2024 model, and Toyota only lets you spec 2025 models online now. So the prices I'm about to tell you aren't fully gonna line up, but they're close enough. You'll get the idea. The 2025 GR86 starts at $29,950 American dollars, and it comes in 3 trims: the base, premium, and Hakone edition, which comes with green paint and bronze wheels. It is beautiful. The color on this car is called Track Bread, but red is in all caps because it's red. On this specific car, it is not an extra charge, but if you get another Toyota 86 trim, it probably is going to be about $500 extra. The Trueno isn't listed on the 2025 trim lineup, but for 2024, it starts at $34,720. This car has 3 options: a $1,700 GR Performance dual exhaust, which I think someone bent on this car, a $75 GR air filter, and $20 GR key gloves. With delivery fees, the total price of the car comes to $37,610 American dollars. Would I personally spec a Toyota GR86 like this? No, because in my mind, a GR86 is a $30,000 car, and the only GR86 you can get for $30,000 is currently the base model. So what I would do is I would get that base model and I would spec it in Trueno blue because it is not an extra charge. And then over time, if I wanted to, I would probably get some aftermarket bronze wheels for it. It is now time for everybody's favorite segment, or at least mine. How many Atlantises can fit in this Toyota GR86's trunk? And before I deliver the sad news that I'm not going to fit in here very well, I should say that this trunk is not a disappointment. I bought a full NASCAR door in North Carolina when I had this car. Stuck it in here, it was huge, put the seats down, and it worked perfectly. It was amazing. Now, if I were flexible, I could definitely slide into the seats if they were down, but without that, this fits half an Atlantis. Welcome inside the Toyota GR86. And before we get to the fun part, the driving on the curvy roads, we're gonna do some quick interior impressions with this car. When you get in this car, you're like, well, it looks old school, but at the same time, does it look old? And the answer is yes. The last car had a very old looking interior, and this car came out and it just doesn't look new age in a way I feel like it should. When you look around at just the different components that you have in here, you have a lot of hard, hollow plastic. The screen doesn't have that brightness of the display that you expect for a modern car. You know, we're so spoiled to bright, really contrasting displays. Like if you have a MacBook, you have the Retina display. I don't even know what that means, but I know that it looks bright and contrasty. This screen is not that. This screen looks really old, and if you're in a sunny spot and you're trying to use the backup camera, you're really not gonna see the backup camera because of the fact that there's just not a lot of contrast on this screen. And it's just super apparent in 2024 that there isn't a ton of contrast on here. Other things you notice about this interior, the seat heater buttons are very, very old and cheap. They're kind of like the ones that are in the Nissan Z. You just have these little like toggle things that click on and off, and they're just very plasticky. You have a couple of blank buttons down here that don't do anything. Something that goes with the old school, old look of this car is that the dash is very plain. There's not a lot drawing my eye around it, and I think something really easy that could help that is if Toyota took the red that's on the door cars in this car and just weaved that through onto the dashboard. It wouldn't look like the best dashboard in the world, but it would at least look cooler to have some contrast in there. Another missed opportunity I see on this dashboard is there's this very sharp angle on the passenger side of the dashboard that curves inward, and there are some cars that use that. I think Toyota even has one. I think maybe it's the RAV4. One of Toyota's SUVs actually has a little shelf on the passenger side of the dashboard, and this was like 2 inches away from having a nice little cute storage shelf over here, and I'm not sure why Toyota just let it jut out but didn't put anything useful there. Something that was true of the last Toyota 86 and is true of this GR86 is the fact that the seats are stiff. They are stiff, but they're actually not that uncomfortable for me. I fit pretty well in these seats. They're still very stiff. And another complaint I have about the seats is that the seat heaters are not very strong. And if you're gonna add the weight and put the seat heaters in here and add the extra feature, they might as well be strong, in my opinion. Something I look for in every loaner car I review is CarPlay. How does it connect? Is it wired or wireless? Is it easy to connect or no? And I got in this car, no wireless CarPlay. Sad. I go to plug in my phone with my new iPhone USB-C, the small USB. I go to plug it in, and I'm like, it's not connecting. Why isn't it connecting? I don't get it. Oh, it's really loose. Why is it really loose? It's because I was sticking the tiny USB-C in a USB-A port, because that's all this car has. And I understand USB-A is something that we have used for a long time. It was the industry standard for a long time, and I get why cars have it. But my new iPhone charger is not a USB-A, and so I get in the car and it is an inconvenience for me to have to buy a new charger to be able to connect to this car. Now, if you own this car, obviously you're gonna spend like 10 bucks on the charger. It's not that big of a deal, but it's still an extra step you have to go through in order to use CarPlay technology. 2 other things to note about this interior. The first is the speakers and the stereo. When I first got in this car and I turned up my music, as I always do, the music was coming from one direction, and that was in front of me. I feel like A lot of modern cars, you get in and you have that surround speaker system. You got speakers up here, you got speakers up here. Sometimes you got speakers in the seat behind you. That is not the case in this car. I have speakers in front of me and they are shooting the music at me. And you can very much tell that the music is in front of you. And compared to a more surround sound system, it kind of just feels like a really old stereo that is blasting at your face. The quality is not there, and it's just very obvious that it's coming from one direction, and it doesn't have that nice surround sound appeal to it, which is unfortunate, but I also get it. This is a cheaper car. Very last thing to point out about the interior of this car before we do driving impressions is that I am not in love with the turn signals. When I click a turn signal to the left or to the right, it doesn't stay. It comes right back to the neutral position. Oh, I don't like that. Stay up or stay down and then click back when my turn is over or when I turn off the turn signal. Because the problem is I am pushing this turn signal up or down and the turn signal's on, but if I don't make a turn, if I'm changing lanes or something like that, I have to manually put the turn signal back down. And I have lead hands, right? So I'm like pushing the turn signal on, pushing it off, and I'm just clicking the turn signal either direction. And the people behind me are like, why does she keep flipping on each turn signal? What is wrong with her? What is her deal? Also, the turn signal is quiet. So when you're listening to music, if you turn off the turn signal and accidentally turn on the other one, you just look really, really confused out on the road because you keep turning on your turn signals. And I look really confused, and it's goofy and embarrassing. And just have the turn signal stay up or down. Don't go back center. Ah. All right, it's time to actually talk about driving impressions with this GR86, which means we get to speed up and have a little fun. And I know it sounded in the interior impressions like I'm being extremely critical of this car. I get that. I do sound critical of this car, but it's not that I don't like the interior of this car. I just think there are a couple of easy places to really improve the interior that weren't used. But I also get that this car is supposed to be inexpensive and charming and bare bones, and it's not supposed to have all of the wild tech and all of the wild comforts in here, because that's not what this car is. It's a budget rear-wheel drive sports car, and I get that, and I love this car for that. And now we get to talk about how it drives, which is the fun part. I like to start my driving impressions where you start driving the car, and that is with the shifter and the clutch. This shifter I'm fine with. It's not my favorite feel of shifter. I feel like when you have shifters, you generally have a few categories. You have the shifters that are light as air and feel extremely inconsequential. You have the shifters that have a little bit of clunk in them, right? They just clunk slightly. You have shifters that clunk a little bit more than that. And then you have the really heavy clunky shifters, which I love, the heavy clunky shifters. This is a light clunky shifter. And I think the one thing that I don't love that much about this shifter is the fact that once it is in the gear, once it is in the slot, it does wiggle. It is not a super tight shifting action. So when I'm right here, I'm in fourth gear, I can wiggle this shifter back and forth in fourth gear. And you can do that on a lot of cars. But I think the thing that is unfortunate is that over the years, those wiggles will continue to get more pronounced because you're using the car more. That's how it works. Things get more used. And if there's already quite a bit of wiggle there, it's gonna get worse. Something else that's just a little odd about this car is the shape of the steering wheel. I feel like a lot of performance cars these days, you get the D-shaped wheel in them. And the D-shaped wheel feels sporty and easy to wield. This wheel is a complete circle. It is just a straight up circle, and there are barely any thumb indentions on this wheel. So it almost looks uncanny because you don't have any thumb indentions, you don't have any changes in angle to make it a D shape. It is just a circle, and that's it. It's a fine wheel. It just takes a minute to get used to because you're like, huh, that just looks a little odd. The clutch in this car is another place where I feel like things could be better, and I felt like this about the last 86. it just has this dead space, right? And I don't know how far the dead space is, but in my mind, it's about 2 inches of dead air when I am lifting off of that clutch pedal that doesn't do anything. There's no catching of anything. You just have to let off the clutch pedal before you can even think about getting into first gear. And I really like a clutch pedal that has action all the way through the release of the pedal. When you're driving this car, you want to feel super connected to it and you want to feel like you're doing something, right? And for a couple of inches, in my mind, a couple of inches, I don't know how far it actually is, but for that first action on the clutch pedal in this car, nothing is happening and you do feel a little disconnected from it. And you get used to it and it's fine. And it's not something that's going to cause you to kill the car. It's not something that makes the car difficult to drive. It's really just a preference thing. And the fact that that dead air doesn't feel as good as I want it to feel. Now, as I'm going through the corners, this car feels great. I really do like my center of gravity in this car. I feel like I am super low to the ground and super just sliding through these corners on rails. It feels really, really nice to go through corners in this car. One thing that you notice is that when you accelerate really hard or you brake really hard, your nose doesn't go up and down, right? Like it really stays in the same place. It kind of feels like you're in a roller coaster car, right? Like you're not going up and down, you're just staying on those tracks, except for when you downshift and you get the back end a little crazy. Couple of hooligan things about this car is that when you accelerate, I really, really liked the low end acceleration on this car. It's very jumpy, but as you get into the higher RPMs, you do realize that this car is lacking power. You know, 228 horsepower is good. It's fine. It's enough. But when you get in those high RPMs, you're not feeling like you're just digging for more power, you know? But if you buy this car and you're a hooligan, which a lot of people who buy this car are hooligans and I love them for that, you're probably gonna try to get some more power out of this car, and I respect you for that. Another hooligan thing is you have a manual handbrake, so if you're going through a corner, you wanna do a little handbrake turn, you got that right there. No electronic handbrakes in this car because we are here for the hooligans. A couple other fun hooligan facts in this car. Brake pedal is stiff. I really like the feel of the brake pedal. And when you're getting near red line, it'll beep and it'll say shift. Don't forget to shift. And that's always a really nice reminder. I love taking this car through corners. It feels really, really nice. And there's a lot of road noise, but I feel like that road noise just makes me feel like I'm out here more connected to the road, having more fun, and I'm going through these corners like, yeah, I can feel everything underneath my feet and around my body. And it's nice. It's very, very charming. I like it a lot. What is really, really cool about this car is that everyone is right. If you're getting into a corner and you don't hit that corner right, you will feel the car dancing behind you. And that's exactly what you want in this kind of car. You want it to feel like that rear wheel drive is dancing behind you. And like if you don't hit a corner the way you should, you're messing up. I love when a car gets mad at you for messing up. That is exactly how things should be. It's just so nice to have a modern car. While sure, the power isn't crazy on this car, it's so nice to have a modern car that doesn't just save you all the time. It gets so old to have cars just step in and help you. You know, oh, you messed up, I'll step in, I'll help you out, no biggie. This car doesn't do that. This car is like, oh, you didn't go in the corner right? Screw you. Do it better next time. And I absolutely love that. The harsh truth of the modern car market, especially in America, is that we're just not into cars like this. We're not buying these raw rear-wheel drive budget sports cars that don't save you when you're going through a corner.
We're buying the more expensive stuff, the automatics, the electrified cars, the fancier cars that have actual screens and nice contrasty features. The GR86 is a car of another time, and it is very, very cool to still be able to drive and buy a car that's from another time. It's honestly a favor to us. We're not buying these in droves. It's just here so that we have access to it if we want it. And it's really cool to think there are still cars like this out here. And it is really, really fun to get to take them out and drive them. So I'm gonna go drive them some more.
Now that we've driven the 2024 Toyota GR86 Trueno Edition, it's time to give it a grade. Welcome to Atlantis' report card. The exterior on this car gets an A. It's adorable. I really like the updates over the last car. I still really like the last car. The 86 and the BRZ have a good styling and design, and I really, really like it. The interior, though, I'm giving a B-. I don't love this interior. I think there are so many places it can improve, but I'm giving it a B- because my husband thinks it's cute. The performance gets an A-. I love the way this car feels, especially on the twisty roads, but I'm giving it an A- because of that little dead space on the clutch that's really weird. And also I feel like the shifter could be less loose when it's in gear. Value also gets an A-. I love a $30,000 Toyota GR86, but this is a $37,610 Toyota GR86, and that is pushing it for me. But if you get a cheap one, good for you. Would I take this car on a road trip? I guess. The seats are a little stiff. It wouldn't be the most comfortable thing in the world, but I would be willing to get in the car for a road trip if I knew that I could lay down at the end of it. And overall, I give this car an A-. It is great. It's a great value in a lot of the trims, and I really, really like it.
The 2024 Toyota GR86 Trueno Edition is new, but it's also nostalgic in both its name and its aim. It's a car for a specific audience, the people who want something new that they can rip and actually afford.
Toyota GR86 is not the perfect sports car, but I would argue that it's better than that. It's an affordable, rear-wheel drive, naturally aspirated, manual little ripper in an era where those do not exist. And that sounds pretty perfect to me.